A primordial Phyrexian living mountain, a walking molten disaster. Let's talk a bit about Solphim, Mayhem, Dominus. The Dominus cycle from All Will Be One present commander brewers with intensely powerful effects. This is release weekend right now, buddy, and this lady in the gown of spears is currently selling for about $5 to $6. It's a very powerful deck and can come out of the gate swinging hard for about $50, not including the commander or basic lands. Alright, now let's get into it, but first take a moment to like, subscribe, leave a comment. You know, that helps the channel and it's free. I don't have a Patreon, I don't have sponsors or anything like that, but I do drink a lot of coffee. I'm drinking some right now. If you want, you can buy me one at the link in the description. Alright, Solphim was forged in the autonomous furnace. She's an infernal giant with a gown of spears who carves mad commands into the metallic landscape with her molten hot appendages. That's what they used to say about me in college. Always urgent and always contradicting her previous orders. That's it. That's all the lore you get. The art itself is pretty intimidating, peering out of a mask of molten metal, wearing a crown of spikes and a gown of jutting spears. It looks like a bunch of little dudes impaled on Solphim spikes as well. I don't know where those guys came from. Pain is the theme of the art and the theme of this budget deck as well. Instants and sorceries are fine and all, but there are tons of permanents that can do repeated non-combat damage, and I tend to lean on that in my deck. Alright, let's read the dang card. We got Solphim, Mayhem, Dominus. 2 red for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror. It's a 5/4. If a source you control will deal combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. It has 1 red Phyrexian, discard 2 cards, put an indestructible counter on Solphim, Mayhem, Dominus. So this is a tailor-made red burn commander. There's something inside me that wants to build a burn deck whenever something like this gets printed. The stats are a little better for the mana value here than you'd expect. Discarding 2 cards is a steep price to pay for the indestructibility, but if you're building recursion into the deck, it can be turned into an advantage. Oh, look at this guy, just Alex Jones with a beard out there. It's 1 and a red for a creature human shaman. This is the conspiracy theorist. Whenever this guy attacks, you may pay 1 and discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Whenever you discard 1 or more non-land cards, you may exile 1 of them from your graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn. I don't envision myself attacking with this super often, but that second ability doesn't care if you discard it to another effect, like making Solphim indestructible, for example. This synergizes with a lot of mono red's card selection. Cards like Faithless Looting, Big Score, and Thrill a Possibility. Look at this guy, he didn't get the extra sauce at Taco Bell, he's in there throwing a fit. Tectonic Giant is 2 red for a creature, Elemental Giant, it's 3/4. Whenever this guy attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, choose one. Chew one if you want to. Tectonic Giant deals 3 damage to each opponent. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose 1 of them. Until the end of turn, you may play that card. This guy does everything we want and gives us access to some impulse cards to use. Mono Red also has access to some tremendous wheels. We got the usual wheels, but then we have cards like Dragon Mage, Nullspine Dragon. I'm a big fan of these cards, and they can fill our hands late game. Then after filling your graveyard for a while, you can use a well-timed Mizzix Mastery to just shoot everyone into oblivion. So this guy's 3 and a red for a sorcery. Exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Mizzix Mastery has overload for 5 red. It's 8 mana, it's a lot. Red also has access to lots of little Punisher creatures you can get out early game. Like this guy, Cemetery Gatekeeper. He comes in and he has this really sweet ability. When he enters the battlefield, exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever a player plays a land or casts a spell, if it shares a card type with the exiled card, Cemetery Gatekeeper deals 2 damage to that player. This guy can really stack on the damage. Harsh Mentor. This guy used to come to the gym and be like, "Come on, dude, you can do it. 1 more rep." 1 and a red for a creature, Human Cleric. It's a 2/2. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, if it isn't a mana ability, Harsh Mentor deals 2 damage to that player. This can be a bit situational, but it hits tons of things. Love this guy. Firebrand Archer and Kessig Flame Breather are essentially the same card. They have a bit of a different stat block, but they both trigger on non-creature spells. So later in the game, if we're casting mana rocks or whatever, we can really stack on the damage with these guys too. And you have Immolation Shaman, 1 and a red for a creature, Viashino Shaman. It's a 1/3. Very similar text to our old buddy Harsh Mentor, except this is only dealing 1 damage. Somebody's pet lizard learned how to use the gas stove. That's why Joe Biden wants to come after your gas stoves, dude. Now, as you might expect, there are a bunch of effects that add on and stack damage, like Torbrand and Toralf. These burn staples go in each other's decks. They're kind of staples of this archetype at this point. Toralf especially can be built really mean. I did do a Toralf deck at one point, but it's a very linear deck. It's not very fun to play, and it's very controlling. Now, red also has some access to some explosive rituals like Geosurge, which is 4 red mana for a sorcery, and you add, geez, I can't even tell how many that is, 7? Spend this mana only to cast artifact or creature spells. So this can power out an early wheeled dragon or a red dragon. In this particular deck, I'm using a lot of creatures and a lot of permanents. So your mileage may vary on something like this. Speaking of creatures, we got this red dragon. 4 red for a creature dragon. It's a 4/4 with flying. When red dragon enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. So this is a very mediocre budget card, but that non-combat damage is doubled with Solphim on the battlefield. 8 damage to all opponents and a 4/4 flyer is really good for 6 mana, and that's how synergy works, buddy. Oh, we can't forget this guy, the Fanatic of Mogus. 3 and a red for a creature Minotaur Shaman, it's a 4/2. When this guy enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. So our devotion to red is going to be pretty high because I'm running a lot of permanents in this deck. This guy is delightfully furry. He's showing off his armpits. I really dig this art. I think it's awesome. Oh yeah, I was talking about rituals. So cards like Seething Song. So this triggered the aforementioned Kessig Flame Breather and Firebrand Archer and can power out our commander a bit early. So this guy would also be a great deck for Descent into Avernus. 2 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. Then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. We break symmetry on this by doubling the damage done to our opponents. This will add up incredibly quickly, and with Solfem out, it does 24 damage to them over 3 turns. I don't know, I'm not a math major. My math might be a little wrong here. I was a psychology major. Speaking of psychology, dude, this is Mana Barbs, 3 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. And there's a hidden text on this that says it psychologically damages them. This is a symmetrical effect unless our boy is out there, then this gets really dangerous. Alright, this is my 3rd time trying to say this guy's name, so if I say it wrong this time, I'm just going to roll with it. But look at this jacked monster. We got Heartless Hidetsugu, 3 and a red for legendary creature Ogre Shaman, it's a 4/3. Tap, he deals damage to each player equal to half that player's life total rounded down. So any opponent that has an even life total, say they're at 24 life, this is going to double it with Solfim on the battlefield. You activate this guy and they're dead. I like how this guy is like he's really buff, he looks really strong, but he doesn't have abs, dude. I feel that. That's the dad bod, brother. So one advantage to building monocolor is that you can save a ton of money on the mana base. You can run a lot of basics. You have a little room to include some utility lands that tap for colorless and some cycling lands. I think Solphim is a great commander for a burn deck. These types of decks can be fun to whip out once in a while if you want a really quick game. Everyone's life total is going to melt down pretty fast and you might become a target. Either way, it's a quick game. Decks like these are also great for battle boxes, where you have a few monocolored decks you can hand out to newer players. A red burn deck will hang with anything outside CDH, and the strategy is pretty simple. The deck I put together has a pretty low curve, a lot of 1-drops like this guy, so you feel like you're doing things from the very start of the game. So now I want to hear what you guys think about Solfim. I posed the question as to whether the Dominus cycle and the attendant epidemic of doubling effects is lazy game design, and is just a cynical attempt to provide powerful chase mythics to sell packs. Well, I don't know. Who knows? I don't really think so in most cases, but I think some of them are a little lazy. But Solfim is at least fun to build around. Snicky G from Better Commander, signing off.